Good morning, or whatever it is, wherever you are. So all this stuff is a thing that I have to process these files into these directories. I have to basically go run it myself. I'd kind of like to stop doing that. Step one is to streamline the process of running it locally. Initially, it was just get it done. Now I'm manually saying which files to process. because the way that seemed convenient at the time to name these things has no correspondence to these file names. So we're producing map images. So we have things like this. So this is the image of the map at a certain time. And since this is kind of like the culmination of everything that's happening, I named it by the final second of that time. The files are named by their start time and their seed. So maybe that wasn't the greatest. Part of this is that I thought I might have to break these periods into multiple like keyframes, so to speak, and then so it wouldn't necessarily be a one-to-one correspondence anyway. Now we have additional complications, such as this series of files that was all the same seed in multiple files, so we need to have some way to manage that. And there are other cases where one file, well, there was one other case where one file it was one seed that really had two things in it that were actually different by the algorithm used. They represent two different map sets. Whereas these, if you looked at it, you kind of saw like advanced objects appearing in the later ones, so it was obviously a continuation of the previous time series. So I think what I need to do, and what I need to do is to have a file that tells me, first of all, what all of these things are, and second of all, a possibly separate file that says where these came from. Right now, I've got a somewhat separate process that gives me my list of all of the arc events that we are mapping over here. I guess that was a couple short resets. That looks like some same seed events too. With a different seed. I did not notice that. Oh, wait, that is... Ooh, did I not notice something in my reprocessing of everything? It would be recent-ish. So I did have to change the code for that. Wait, 702, 702. Did I not rerun you after doing the update? Did I even do the update? Oh, I was testing fully incremental processing. Okay, so we may have some other stuff to do first. I can run up my local server and test it in a full reprocess scenario, which I actually thought I had done. Because I had like processed it and then I had to reset to get the entire data set. Yeah, you're good. So I must have never run it on the actual server. Oops. I need anywhere. Make sure this is actually updated. Okay, that's up to date. So this is just has to. No. Well, yes, Rails, Arcs. I never got around to running that after it had updated. Okay, so that should straighten out in time. So this separation is part of the problem. I want that file to be in the static files since that's kind of where we deal with it anyway. Or it needs to be synchronized with all of this stuff. And since the stand-in for this file isn't going to need the source file information, I might have a separate file that says which of these we've processed and maybe how they map to the directories that we've generated. Well, I guess if the map exists, then you know it's done. If it doesn't exist, but yeah, I need some information about which files we processed. So that I don't have to run through the entire file to know if we've generated it. So the other thing about this is for every file, I've got two processes. One that produces final image, and one that has the time series built up of it. Is there another one of these? No, that's actually a reset. So so actually the per file for the file source map might have to be for each of these. What's been processed? And then somewhere we just have a arcs list which either of these can produce that's just the start and end time seed. This means we're going to have to treat this a little bit of like a local database thing. So we won't have the use of database query and update operations. Okay. So I would like to replace this file with a local static file. and probably a separate source file, just because that would be information we don't need to be transmitting every time. Clients are going to have no use for that. And that would give us file has been processed. Now, in the case where there is a new file for the same seed, we would still need to reprocess that into a new image, and I'll eventually have to do like dead file detection. Or dead directory detection. So we'll have to start. All right, so the arc list could exist, I guess. Each of those things will have to have its own map, unless I can combine them. Now, the data reading process is currently like semi-unified. In fact, it's kind of fully unified. So I probably could combine these. Well, let's get one of them to be conservative first. They're still going to output different directories, so that would mean our arc list would have to be up one. And our source file map so what probably what you want to do is set this up to skip the output step. And instead, we process everything, which will take a while. I might actually just want to start with just one to get a database going. Actually, I've got my small file test case. And say that it doesn't get the master object, it's the end date. We need like seed and stuff. So we would need to get, let's see, it doesn't care about zoom levels. So this would only be on Zoom 24 to write out that one. Actually, what the heck do we index this by? Right now, we're effectively going with, well, I guess if we did start time, that would get replaced as you incremented. Is that a thing? So right now, arcs are being defined. Yeah, we can double check what we're doing here. By arc, which is a slightly different process. Okay, we got a second start. Where you were saying second start is just the... Is that the floating point second start? Because you don't seem to be dealing with millisecond. Oh, right. We're using the start, epilogue arc start, which is a thing we do get. But I don't know... Does tiled remember that? No. Out dot second start. The current start we're working from, it would be when out was new. That we need to reset that. Oh, yeah, this is the old start. Arc. Wait. No, I touched this up, right? Because this is only one after we reprocessed it. Right, because we do this at the data cache layer. So for that one case, the file combining happens a layer down. So that would be fine. But you also have to record the seed. So you're almost like an arc, but with all this extra stuff. Actually, do you really need to be accessed outside? Well, it's convenience here. Oh, but we're not in an instance context here. So this is saying we're adding to the arcs anytime, well, there's if start equals 0. Well, this code is going to kind of go away because we don't need to just do that anymore. I'm wondering if I should be making arc objects to go along with this. Rather than doing all of the same fields. You're not going to have server information, are you? That was just a pass-through. Well, log file has a server. In fact, that's all we have here. So an individual log would have an arc. So I normally do the arc stuff via a constructor. So maybe I create an arc? Let's see, do I have to... Don't expect to ever actually see that. That's just a baseline. The placement, we do have to be updating our end time because this only set that at a changeover. And then set at the very end, we might need to do a new thing. But this has to create the object up front. And then arc was set up to be reader only. I don't need to replace this. So we have to allocate this up front. Every time we do new. Server is going to be something we only need once. Seed is going to be anything we only need once. We'd have to wait for a start line as well. Or do I only define your arc when we reach an end? Should this still be an... Well, I need to record all this information. It might make more sense to record these piecemeal. So now we're like, well, I don't even have the start time when I do this. Wait, log.mn. Oh, right. That's so that it can get the proper end time. So when we're tracking end time, we could like cached. Actually, did I even make that a method I prox log time? Yeah, these should have a timestamp. I'm not sure I put that in. No. So I don't get that default time. I mean, I could get it, but... Now here we have an actual start time. And I guess our end is going to be at least there. But we still have to be able to do an update if this one was 0. I know there's a object-oriented principle about not reaching through objects. But it's either that or I'm effectively duplicating every single field in there. So when we come down here, maybe I should just duplicate it. But then that arc code completely goes away, and maybe that means that I sort of like replace the tiled placement log with that as the arc? All right, so we want like S start. Oh, that's still going to be a hash, so a number integer is probably fine. I'm gonna. I'm gonna have to be saving and loading this to a file. This is probably not gonna be. Well, we're getting about one a day. Probably still reasonable to do it as JSON. But even then, the thing you load from the file is not going to be an arc. It's going to be itself a hash table. Now, if we end up reading and writing to JSON, it's probably going to have to all be string keys. Oh, I need to... Okay, so server ID. So actually, we're not going to be able to have server ID here. Which is not going to be super compact. And this is not going to be a stand-in drop-in replacement. Do I have a terminal open for you yet? All right, this is an equal, not a self-a-hash assignment. Okay, so you are known by start time here. So if we go and update that start time, it should replace that one. Server. I guess I can keep a local cache of servers here for have the abbreviated version. Or I could do this on a per server basis since we're only ever going to have Big Server 2 right now. And I have to deal with fetching the other files if there ever were other files. So this thing is capable of processing. Oh. My output data paths don't account for that. I mean, I guess I could kind of do something in the place of this. Yeah. So we may just have to run with that for now. In which case... Yeah, there's no information down to there. And this we would want to write out in that same directory. Well, no, this would be the arcs table, which is the thing that clients would fetch. We also need to record. So this is going to be, we've got log file there. So we don't have an intermediary step where we say what it turned into. We do an each. So for conservative file processing, we need a list, or really just need to know, was this processed and when was it last touched? And that has to go... Does that need to be a look-aside? Well, it has to be somewhere in the same file set, because eventually that would live on S3. Too many windows. If this was a server-specific directory, we would have that be there. What do I care about? I might not need to know which file or which directories each of these turned into, but recording it would be nice, because really I just kind of need like a file with a timestamp. Yeah, I don't know if that will reprocess that timestamp. I don't know that it will give it to me. So output dir. Okay, so that's just what we're passing there, tiled send. To make a conservative decision about whether this file has been processed, I need to be able to say log file from the, without reading the log file, which is going to be that second end thing, with just the information we have from the log file, which, log file. So the subpath cache map file path is cache path, so that's actually going to be big server. So I have to do any necessary I'd have to break it up and make sure the path exists pretty much. Or I have a single file that has the, well, yeah, a single file would be good because I'm going to have to fetch that every time. It'd be bad if it got corrupted. And we have some sort of what do we need to know? We would like to know maybe I need to do local. So right now I'm taking this and eaching it, and then that's it. Maybe. Well, I'm only going to end up writing this file if we were successful, which is not going to allow incremental processing if multiple files get dumped at once. Yeah, unless we do a write. So if this has the full path in it, it would be a global directory of all servers. I want a full file path? I'd really rather not be checking for the existence of an actual path, although that does give me a pretty direct way to reprocess. Well, I guess deleting the file is going to be a pretty direct way to reprocess. Okay, so deleting one file gives me a direct way to reprocess that one file. Oh, we are generating two different things here eventually. Although, yeah, output is not actually going to be part of this. So I need like output dir, and I'm going to need like the separate subpaths that I might actually want to record. Okay, so that might be the kind of data structures we want. So yeah, we've got, if we do JSON, we've got a format. What does this look like if we try to get a file that does not exist? No such file or directory. Okay, that's What is the spelling of that? Existent exists. And then I guess we want to write this somewhat incrementally. So I lost json.parse. Now this did not have to write a JSON file anywhere. So if we complete an entire log file, generate, why is there a fast generate? Checks for circles. Well, I was going to do this in one. Wrong number of arguments, given one expected to 3. Oh, right, we probably need a path. I'm probably going to have to actually specify output dir, because that may change. And then we need to specify placement dir. As being plus output dir. And I mean, we're not being too careful with our file formatting elsewhere. And do these go in different places? I guess I could do separate processed for keyplace and maplog as a way to keep track of those separately. But really, if we go ahead and combine that, it's going to be, did we process it? Oh, and all the output. After stuff needs to be changed. All right, output. Is it going to be worth pre-printing that? Can you see it? I'm also going to be serving this one. I can always reformat it if I need to. Oops. Oh, that did not load. Oh, hey, how about we, use the value? That also did not load. Oh, wait, what? Wrong completion. Okay. But when converting to JSON, we do have to 2S this. Because that is also going to become a string. Works for the Ruby hash. Now, we want to know... Oh, this doesn't have... I don't have any timestamps in here. We've got our output directory. We've got... Where are we? Date.now? Time.now? Now, that's not going to be a great thing to have in a JSON file. I guess I could string that. Well, a string is what I get from the server, ultimately. And that looks comparable to my other timestamps. But I'm not going to be able to do the quick and dirty JSON with that. So next, if proxmog time within file.mtime. So date is really what we care about. And date, okay. Let's see. So I'm thinking I'm going to combine my two processes so I only have to read the files once. But what if I want to experiment with our output formats? Now, if you're a date, right, that's an extra library, isn't it? So does that mean that file time time object? Okay, so they should be next if no implicit conversion of string into integer. Why would you output that as a string? Unless I got carried away, no. Okay. $84. It didn't write it as a string. We printed processed, right? Oh, wait, did I do... Right. The file was only processed once. But it might have been processed to an array of things. Need to update that. I guess if you didn't exist, we'd have to have... let's see, do we want to have this be the same or separate for each output format? That's for each entry. So what I need for conservatism is just the time it was processed. The list of things it processed into is more just so I can say, well, okay, this, well, even this isn't even complete. Because we're only going to have one entry for the seed. I'm not sure I'm liking any of these outputs. So you need to know a timestamp that, which I mean could almost be that if I did an output file per input file, well, I don't know if I can get a file timestamp from S3. I mean, that's probably just going to be the mod time from like an HTTP sense. But a per file thing means we have to fetch the per file thing. So if we just have file paths and file times, this is an or equal. So if we did reprocess it, we'd be like appending to the array multiple times. So if we process a file, we should be replacing it unconditionally. Then we have time. We might have a list. Oh, well, no, because if... So that would be... Do time, and then the list of things we output. There's going to be when processing started, which hopefully won't be a problem. And then as we add things, we have potentially both key placements. This is. I'm debating my script splitting again. I might want to change formats. I might want to change formats separately. If we keep them separate, then the file can be stored in the output directory for that thing. And I didn't need to do some of these changes. Except I do need output dir for args. Unless I just put it in key placement because that's where this script is running. Then we don't have to worry about reporting both of these in here. And we just need to have paths? I mean, they could still be timestamps. This leaves open to have more interesting paths if we need to. Okay, and then we skip because we've already processed that one, which is what we want. We just have to kind of duplicate this in the other file. So as long as we're only doing one zoom level here, this can take care of the arcs and the other one doesn't. So what we want to do is we should not need to write all of these. Although the timestamps they were written is going to be a bit off. But they're not even that old. And then I shouldn't need all of these. These are still some special test cases. Oh, this args table needs to be keyed. The file we fetch really only needs to be an array. And then we can reindex it on load. uh, so so we get it to write in that format first, and then we just get to load in that format, and it should be fine, right? Well, this only right now this only writes. We do want incremental updates. I may have to force it to reprocess though. So go back to our small file, skip that. So this is really just going to be args.values. This is the easy one. Then on this, well, we have to run this once. I should probably be doing pretty during development. And then we could, well, I guess the arcs would be the one you'd most want to do that. I think it's just set some options. And maybe this one we might want to... I mean, this won't matter as much, since it won't be fetched a lot. It does take a while to simply read those, though. Now, it's faster when I was attempting to just determine the bounds for the server side, because I'm not like doing anything. So conceivably, I could make it a separate script. Just I have to read the files again. Oh. So the downside is of leaving it separate is that we're going to do a fetch from the server. Well, I probably need to set up a caching process to use temp, because we do reread this multiple times. Once for each zoom level, in fact. And it's like on Heroku, we've got temp. If we, I mean, that's kind of an easy place to stick it. And it could also look into, like, if Lambda or something. I mean, last I looked, they didn't have a good story for Ruby, or any story for Ruby. Maybe they've done Docker by now. All right, so we want to keep that for now. What we eventually want to do is do this as a list, and then we go through and list.each do arc start arcs 2s. Okay, your start is not 2s though. I'd forgotten just how much stuff I added to this. Speaking of long processing. Okay, you're done. This is a direct feed into you. So did we... Okay. So apparently I tested doing this incrementally. Oh, my browser is still caching this. Maybe it was even caching it before. Okay. So that is correct. This thing is still processing. This doesn't even include the write-out phase. So this is... The processing step is why I kind of wanted to combine several stages here. But that might not be convenient as I go to develop other output formats and stuff. I could probably just disable an output stage. Oh. So key place is really just that. For map log, do I need to record each zoom level? Because that's actually going to be each pass that it runs. Well, the recording is purely informative. But since it runs each pass, it will be all duplicated unless I put the extra information in there. In fact, this is per log file. Ooh, yeah, I can't do that. It's going to process it multiple times. I sometimes wonder if I should have done zoom level first and then time. Because I need to have a directory to say we processed this zoom level of all these things. Man, I'd forgotten just how slow the map logs had gotten. Or this isn't even map logs yet. And the sad thing is that a lot of this probably is map log processing because I wanted to combine the loops. To cut down a lot of the duplication. So that was one of the big arcs. Alright, so if I want to do multiple pass things on these log files, I'm going to need a way to fetch it, save it, process it multiple times, which is not how things are set up right now. Maybe I could make the server system write it to a temp, and then it would essentially be a lot like the regular file cache. Wow, this really has gotten bad. We are past the really big ones. Well, assuming it's going in order. Well, I guess it's a good time for me to refill water then. Be back in a few minutes. Cannot draw any cards this turn. That becomes a bit more interesting with the 3-cost nightmares, doesn't it?
Sports, talented with the arts, she was a tragic heroine who died at 18. When did she die? Like 25 years ago. There was a student named Aya that went here 15 years ago, wasn't there?
そ
Who
うどう
knows?
か
I'm
な
busy. Just get out
忙
of
しいんだ
here.
よもう帰ってくれ
Yeah, fine. I leave the school. Granted, he wouldn't know anyway, because teachers have to move schools every 5 years. I wore myself out while
14 strength. That's pretty sweet. But is that what they started with? Because that doesn't get boosted up, right? As far as I know. Okay, so we need to do some more debugging. So the issue is when it comes out here, it wants to go in either direction. So when it comes out, I think we need to make sure. But why would it ever try and go backwards? There's an exit over here.
I hear there's a Time Lord here. I think that's pretty awesome. As a Dark Lord, the Time Lord is the only thing I fear in the universe today. I mean, and this is a universe that includes reruns of Jersey Shore and Khloe Kardashian. So, yeah, that's a lot to fear, and the only thing I fear is Time Lords. I'm telling you. That's the only thing to fear. Not even fear itself, because fear is like my third cousin. You know, he's kind of the stupid one that wears the helmet, you know, just in case. Because he's really klutzy. You know, he's always tripping over his own big feet. But that's my family problems, and I'm not going to get into that right now. Okay? Because I'm not here to get into that. I'm here to talk about Amazon Prime. Because I'm a...
Welcome back. All right, we're still on a not very big file. I'm wondering if reading all of these at once has caused the process to hit some sort of like memory level where it's like just swapping a bunch. Ruby interpreter, definitely very, very big. I mean, I think I've reprocessed everything before. I wonder if I've got like a memory leak. Because like I know it's going to go up as it reads each file. It's possible. Where are these? I guess I never like explicitly close the file handles. We've got open, which returns a file handle. So they're all going to be file.open string.io.new, which is supposed to look like an IO stream, and combined, which could just dummy implement that. Although it would need to be able to close its intermediate handles. So unfortunately, this goes for every client because they're controlling the iteration. Oh, no, they're both using tile placement log, which is actually doing the iteration. So, well, line equals file.gets. File equals log file.open. It'll take care of most of them. Our combined file, we'll want to close that, and okay, so we're guaranteed to have one at start. Ish. Alright, maybe we're going a little bit faster now. Oh, some memory did drop. So it's not a complete leak. Maybe I just had to do garbage collection? Uh-oh. Oh, combined log file. No. Find method path for nil class. Right, because I wasn't asking for path before, but that was still a thing that should be there. Alright, so I do need to get that seed back to do testing on you. Let's get our format change done. Okay, I switched you back in order to do that. Okay, you are there. You are there. Yeah, I do want you formatted. So that'll just be for running it. This time needs to read it in that format to write it in that format. Okay, so now this should be more readable. So we know we can say we shouldn't have any of those 702s processed. These might not be in order because I was testing on the one first. That would actually be kind of nice, wouldn't it? Alright, so we've written it. Can we successfully load it? I'm like printing out too much stuff now, but log file arcs. And is there like a sort by? Okay. Now, our problem case is going to be our combined one. So I need uh 268.018.5702. Multiple files. And that's where we're having trouble. Unfortunately, we're having trouble at the end. Okay, so processing 1 got to around 500 megabytes. Seems like there could be some leaks somewhere. Path for nil. Map final placements 97. Logfile.path. Combined log file. Logfiles.last. I forgot to dupe this. Because we're using it as a queue, it's going to go down. I did that at some point, but then I like shuffled around where I was managing that. Okay, so we processed that one. You test case. Now we can test out our incremental processing. I took that line out because we did need to reprocess our small one. Okay, I was printing the arcs, regenerating the thing, which we did. And there wasn't a whole lot left. Alright, so I'm going to have to, if I keep this separate, I am going to have to duplicate some of this code over on the map log, but I might want to copy these to new formats and try those out separately sometime. And the way I'm doing it right now, I need multiple passes on each file anyway in order to do my zoom levels. Which means I'm going to want to work out some means of managing reading a file multiple times when it was one we download from a remote server. We'd rather not pound the server on that. This is still a useful checkpoint. Data server. I often like have a separate terminal for get stuff, just because you start doing up arrow run and you like get duplicate commits and weird things. And we end up touching some other stuff. So I'm not super happy about using the arc there. All right, so this is conservative processing of key placements. Closing files when done. So just implementing conservative placements for map logs will be a quality of life improvement for me. And then to run this, to run off server, I'm going to need to do something else. What the? Log tiled. So I'm going to want you as a test case. We should be able to take care of all this. You're not going to deal with arcs. Maybe I could like separate this into like output objects or something. No. I need to watch out for that completion. Thank you. All right, so that right should be fine. You're not going to deal with arcs because we only need to do that once per each file. Sometimes well, for several things. The front end of the map is a combination of leaflet.js with a bunch of common stuff, and then some Elm that compiles to JavaScript, handling some of the side UI and other management things. Right now, I'm working on the back-end data processing that runs it all, or that makes the data that we use to determine what to draw here. It's a manual process. I want to make it so I don't have to touch the scripts as much as things update, and then eventually get that to where I can run it, have it automatically running on a server somewhere, just uploading stuff to... Oh, yeah, I'm going a little bit. I never thought about it being too fast. Sorry about that. One of those things where I sometimes... okay. That doesn't help. Think faster. See, I think faster than I talk and talk faster than I type, so I end up dropping words from sentences and things. And then when I get a little nervous, I also talk too fast. Yep. Central US. Okay, so the other end of this here I guess I could really do this here to have that a little bit more consolidated. Okay. Cool. Oh, I checked in with the actual processing disabled. Oops. Oh no, what? That's a shame. Now, by that, do you mean go to school in the US? Or just go to school in general? And then you have to output. No, I am not working at Google. I thought about it years ago, but I never quite got up to deal with all the moving and stuff. Then again, I spent a lot of time in one place that didn't necessarily do their type of work, so I don't know if they'd have me. And I've been kind of burned out at times, so I kind of got the impression that they were a very, very long hours kind of place. All right, now you do need to disable output while we're testing this. I also want to do a small file test on you. Why do I have all those? Oh yeah, that's the opposite side of the world. It's kind of it's morning-ish here, so that doesn't. Well, like it's getting to late morning. But yeah. Good night. Oh, I guess I should check if you output properly. 20 windows. Oh, that one became front. Okay. Oh, and I did leave them both formatted. That's probably fine. Now, this is going, from our previous example, is going to take quite a long time. So I can maybe start planning next steps. Wait, how is this not showing up in my top memory yet? Oh, it's probably not building up as much stuff because this is doing a high zoom level, excluding a whole bunch of objects. So apparently it is those memory structures that were hitting the memory. Tiled. So we're making objects there, making objects there. Now we're creating these things, and I should be discarding them when we're done. So I think, I mean, it's a lot of garbage, but we'll eventually free it up. Anyway, I have a problem, and then I have set up my iteration method. I guess I need to look at one of these for a little bit. Okay, so keep an eye on that. I have set up my iteration to do zoom levels, and then to do servers, and then to do log files within the server. Which, this is using my local file cache right now. So it's fine to open things multiple times. Maybe it'd be a little bit more efficient to try and do them all at once. It simplifies the processing a bit to think of it in terms of passes, or simplifies it in my head anyway. In order to live update on assuming I can use the platform, and I'm going to have to think out where I move these things so that they're executable from there. I'm going to need to somehow put those where I can use them. Now, so on Heroku, you don't have a permanent storage medium. You do have temp. So I might be able to set up something that if we have a file we need, we download it to temp, and from there we open it out of that location. That's almost like the file cache that I've got. It's at a different path. But I'd actually have to do a two-step process to build that file cache first. Or I could try to modify this thing to say, well, okay, if we go to the trouble to fetch anything, I need to modify this. I need that to be per zoom level. So the way I was doing this was log file if it's been processed. I need to know which zoom levels I've done if I'm going to do it in this way. Which itself says maybe I should invert this. It has zoom levels at the inner loop. I believe my reasoning here was that if I do the small zoom levels first, I can get that done faster and see some results. If I put that on the inner loop, then all I really have to be able to do is to make sure that these log files are reopenable without refetching the contents. And then this can happen at the file level. And then we loop over this on zooms, and I don't have to do any super fancy caching. Well, I'd still read it twice to do key placement and to do this. Which raises the argument, do I refactor so that like file output is a different thing? Oh, well, no, actually, they process level 24 in different ways. They can't use the same iteration. But that would be 2 fetches of the file, which puts us back to, well, it might still be useful to invert this for knowing if the file has been processed. So you're going to move up to there. Everything else goes down. And end is fine, but this goes down. This is supposed to be at the end of doing the zoom level. And this is where we think this thing, if I really want to record what we're doing here, should be outputting. There's no way to separate If I wanted to go and do different zoom levels, I might want to be conservative in that. Okay, log file each. So I keep track of what's going on. Since I set this up there, I'm going to delete this as it stands. You are indexed by log file path right now. I'd have to like path with a zoom appended to it, which would have been a very easy fix. Art Bar. Thank you for the follow. Glad you like watching me stare at code. Well, this will... This does require those resumable log files. I can open it multiple times for the local files, and I'll just have to make it sure... I will have to do something with server files to make sure that they can reopen contents multiple times. Nope, I didn't delete this. So that was effective in preventing redoing stuff. And some of these are going to get really big and take a really long time. So the first level of this would be to make it sure that maplog is able to, even just in memory, reuse a file. Server open, yeah, client.getContents. So we would want to, well, I might not have a special thing. I don't know, when it goes out of scope, I mean, it's still garbage, but so we'll make this new string IO every time, which should reset file positions and things. We should not have to re-download it. Now, if I do keep this as two separate scripts, we're still going to have to download everything twice. That is where, well, so either I need to do a thing where we like download to temp and then check temp, so it starts to become a little bit more like the file cache version, or I need to be able to set up so that we have, let's see, so we have like a module for each of these processings. We would, that would take care of your write tiles. I would have to figure out where I did, I guess they'd have to have their own processed and arcs and stuff. And I should probably, even though I'm not doing zoom levels right now, For consistency, this should be here. It'll be the same regardless, so that wouldn't be a big deal if we did do zoom levels on that. No, earn final placements. So we're going to iterate over the servers, we're going to iterate over the logs. These will handle zoom levels a little bit differently. But that's all within the context of a log file where we could potentially reuse the contents and fetch once. So I would have to be able to extract this into some sort of like map log output. So you would determine the zoom levels you're going to use. I could maybe pass down some of the object info. So you get oversized floor removal. So yeah, that is looking pretty duplicated. So maybe I can extract that. And I could even have like a object database thing going on. And we just use that, a bunch of separate properties, but I could potentially pass that as a big collection, or as a single thing to this stuff. Now, I guess one thing about this is if they're separate, it's very easy to have one thing actually start using it differently. Without immediately affecting the rest of them. But they are currently the same. So we can extract object information. We have the process of, they each have their own process of writing something out. Which we use a little bit of context information, and that's it. So that's mostly a function. Which is using the data from here. Because this was like super similar. Now, it means I'm kind of duplicating my effort on that. However, I cannot use the same pass right now. Because am not doing zoom levels for the final placements. So they're going to have all of the objects at Zoom 24, whereas the individual placement logs are not. So it's still separate passes, separate zoom settings, separate iterations, but if we're inside the context of a log file, we don't have to worry about like local caching the file. You'll have your own processed stuff. All right, so far, this is working out. And I kind of did too much at once. Matlog output, zoom on inner loop with cached server file contents a bit. All right, so now we're clean here. We want, this is like object data. And I guess one slight possible reservation about this is that this might be a volatile format as we do stuff. And this whole gem needs to get split up, but I'm always working on things. It is, oh no, I'm already in this subdirectory. Oh no, it's lib. Lib, oh, family trees. This is gonna be like object data. Class. If we instantiate it and then it reads a bunch of stuff, kinda. So we're gonna have object size, object over, floor removal. Min size is calculated on the zoom stuff. So I guess you should probably take a path to read the file from where there's at least some customizability. And should you immediately read? Seems a bit dangerous. Or maybe object data is the instance and like read is a class method that returns an instance? All right, so you now I might be able to have a bit of a different interface here. The simplest version of this is we just make this a big collection of objects. And maybe we don't need to say object since it's the object data. Bounds is used locally, object over. Let's see, so that would be object data, object size of object, object over of object. Now, I guess it was nice to be able to theoretically. Actually, I must have copied this from one file to the other because I don't actually use one of these data dimensions in key placement. Yeah, you don't do object size. All right, so we can do new, we could do an immediate read if we wanted to, I guess. That's kind of a stateful thing. And they're tiled. Currently takes a whole bunch of optional properties. Oh, and this is where we can deal with the default values of all these. Right, because you were an optional. If object size is optional processing. Well, that still consolidates the loading process. I could still pass the individual fields. But that is part of excluding things. So maybe I don't want to pass that as a big collection of stuff. It could still be a reasonable place for well. Yeah, if it's passed or if it's not. So that's not necessarily what you want to use as your default. So we would say Did I? Yes, we did set ourselves to the module scope. I probably didn't actually implement that path. And you need to return self. So that we have that usage pattern. And my other process is still running. I don't think they touch any of the same files. It might be on one of the really big ones right now, but they are like 1.4 gigabytes on memory there. And we expect this to do nothing. And it also, well, it didn't try to use any of the data from there. Since it didn't do anything. Oh, there we go. Tile dot right. Oh, because I had this disabled the whole time before. So that would be a similar problem with you. Okay, so we think that's probably okay. That's a little bit of commonality. One might imagine that perhaps you could think of this more as object ID data than object array lookup. This is the most straightforward conversion. And it lets us keep things like this optional. Extract, object, data loading. Alright, so our loop is kind of the same. We like to have that do that. So the things that we need to specialize. Well, this thing is putting things into exactly the formats that these two processes need. probably, if I'm reformatting stuff into other output formats, it's mostly going to be a data encoding issue. Like, I'm pretty sure that these are doing, yeah, just doing like the difference encoding. That's probably still somewhat appropriate. So we want to somehow extract the output formats. So I might actually want, so currently those go right along with the settings for which zoom levels, which min width, so like everything inside of here. Well, yeah, because that would, and then we would be able to go down to one processed. I have to figure out what to do with this. So each of those would have to determine which zoom levels they wanted to do. Or I could, maybe I could have one process that took parameters for the zoom level, because we've got zoom levels, we've got full detail. That's not necessarily the same. Well, just saying min size 0. The only thing that would be different there would be objects that had no size information. Maybe. Object over. Those are going to be separate calls because they have separate parameters. So that's kind of okay. The zoom levels, we set that up to full detail. That becomes min size 0. That will pretty much just make your cell size and everything work out. Because that'll be full detail, so that would give us an iteration here. That would give us, we'll be passing object size, slightly different. I'd have to deal with that being a condensed processed, which, I mean, if we've done the file, haven't done the file. Probably pretty similar. Well, unless I'm working on one or the other. We just remove an output method. But these are going to have to be different processes. So that we've got this loop, which I guess you're probably taking. You only need log file as a parameter. Then the zoom levels and the full detail. That will be your loop. And then something to specify the output format. Which is really just a function. Unless it has the zoom level loop. currently, the zoom levels we generate are directly related to the format we're outputting in. Pretty directly related. So that will mean they're each individually calling this. So I guess you'd also need to pass in objects. What does this start to look like? Module. I did this plural before. Although with map final placement. I was kind of basing this on keyframe. It's not keyframes. But placements is sort of a plural. Alright, so you will not directly use that. I don't think you'll directly use that. Actually, I don't think those scripts might not directly need that. You will be using that. You won't be directly using that. Wait, what is... I have to think about those. Those might need their own abstraction. Right, because that is sort of like script level information about it needs to be loaded once. So this is more, yeah, this is like the top level stuff. Well, it's more efficient to do that once, but it could be done on each write. I'm not sure about JSON yet. We're going to have something like this. Oh, and we're shadowing objects. Oops. And then we lose all this. You'll take care of all the file stuff. And this is where we have, well, right now, these two things have their particular settings. We would want to share the objects database. And then we have to decide what to do about you. Well, processed is going to be per file now. Arcs. Except we don't get the handy list of what we processed it into. I could have this make a list of like have write tiles return like some sort of like subdirectory. Speaking of subdirectories, that's not going to be a constant. Or I don't think it should be a constant. Or is that, they haven't really instantiated anything here. Yeah, this is just a code module so far. So for any given instance, probably the objects in the output dir are going to be constant, and we'll process a bunch of log files. That's going to make this awkward. So tiled objects. Oh, actually, you look at different stuff, don't you? Tiled placements, yep. So only this one will have that ambiguity. Okay, so that finally completed. So we should now have, I guess I'm practically going to have to regenerate this. It is kind of nice to seeing what each file turned into. Now, I don't have all the individual 702s here, which, right, it's never going to see those because the file iterator is kind of hiding the older files. I will at some point have to, I guess, check my arc list versus the outputs to detect if there was one that's no longer needed. So you process, you write. you're going to write to one or more paths and define one or more arcs in the process of doing that. Now I could read the log again. And do arcs separately, which would kind of undo some of the work I've done. Actually, have I? Oh, I only had to deal with that definition. No, that would have had to been dealt with. Yeah. Oh, actually, it is referencing it from there. So, given that I'm going through log files, I could just do this, and I did kind of not like the way I was using some of those properties. Although I think I ended up... No, it was really just the end again. But that is then going back slightly to two separate processes determining end times. Which have to be perfectly synced or else. But I could turn that into just another processing pass. To reading the file yet again, but as long as we've got cached contents, that's not terrible. Next, put the key. Well, yeah, we still got all this junk down here. So I think processed is going to be a concern of the outer script. Arcs I can get on any iteration. I've got a process to pull that information from a log file. But it's a separate process from the stuff that's generating the maps, which is what's getting the actual endpoint to write out, and having those in sync would be really nice. If we use the same loop, it has to be the same. Maybe, do I just have you return a file paths tiled arc send to s? If I had you return the list of arcs that you processed, now what is that looking like in map log tiled? So you were doing per zoom level. You didn't have to deal with arcs, but you're going to do multiple passes. So you'd want to collect all of the paths that were written. See, these are the arcs. If we return arcs from there, we can build the arcs table. We've got all the information. For the map logs, you'd almost want to say, here's the arcs and zoom levels we've made. So we return a very similar list, and it would be up to this to say, well, okay, so we generated that subpath. It will be processed with all of the subpaths it generated. So we'd have to have like one data structure. We'd have to return something. And, is that where you instance? You go through the zoom levels, so you make this like a... So this goes through here. It like makes an instance around each tiled. From there, you can ask for the arc. You can ask for the path it would have generated. You can ask that to write its tiles out. We'd have to go back to putting these things as parameters. Or you do the zoom level and we move the zoom level iteration. Do the subcalculation in here. We move the zoom level iteration back to the master script. So it's like log file zoom outputter objects, big long list. Zoom level, I can even leave zoom levels here as like your standard amount. I'd probably want to defer execution. We could do that, the sort of like lazy execution of getting the list of tileds. So if we did outputter objects, they'd have to get passed into each one because that would be zoom. You would calculate the tile width is what you... right tiles needs the zoom. And then tile width, we only use there. So that's really more like that. Then we come along to that and say, okay, here's your log file. Process log file. Or do I have to give it the log file up front and then we process it lazily? Because the idea is we have done this, well, it's all going to be plurals. Right, I was thinking instance per tiled versus instance per log file. There's going to be one arc, there's going to be one path, there's going to be one write. That says this would have to be a class method that created these. Which means it would have to have all of the parameters that went into one of them. So that would be back to this being a big thing. Does it make sense? So this is like all context, so it would be like a context of the process. Maybe each would okay, we wouldn't actually need objects past that generation point. We would need to remember zoom, we would need to remember output dir on a per tile basis. So that way you can get the arc data and then we can query it from wherever we need to. Update that. We can ask it what path it would have written to. What paths it would have, because no, it would be a set of output sets, each of which needs to get written, each of which is going to have some sort of subpath that identifies it. Alright, so the only thing I really need to be able to do here is to say, okay, we have this output method, it needs to do this stuff. And then there's the question of how do we get the arc information. It's fine to say, okay, process this file, write it out. We need to track at a per log file level. Well, when the log files can be tracked themselves, it's convenient to have a log of what got written out. Because these are not necessarily one-to-one relationships. Although we're still going to be missing some stuff on the input file side. Yeah, I suspect I'm not going to get a complete solution to this terribly soon. This is almost feeling like they're asleep on it kind of problem in terms of how to break this down. Because there's a bunch of different levels from, we've got the sort of top level config, we've got the per log file stuff, and then we've got the sort of like per output thing. I could just keep it as a straight up module, I just have to pass in all the parameters. And then how does our top level process get so open questions? It would be nice if we could have a single use of each file to immediately use downloaded contents. We're almost there. We have the question of, we have an output method. We have per run config, dir object data, we've got per file, we have per file config. We've got per file. We've got per arc. We've got per zoom, which is potentially our actual file output. And we need to record our arc data. We need to record as generated. We need to record file processed. It's getting really tempting just to process the file again for the arc data, just because you don't have to worry about kind of getting two outputs out of something. But we could go with, here, process this log file. It gives us a bunch of outputs. And each of those outputs is going to have some data about stuff. I guess the thing I don't like about that is the per run config. I guess I do like with the cache, with the maplog cache stuff, where you sort of have a set of, you've got a cache, you've got servers, you've got log files, you've got each server's list of files, you've got, or a list of servers with a list of files, and then you've got the individual files. So this is like a output collection of some sort, which also collaborates with, creates sets of, I don't know, placements, data sets. Well, you can use that for convenience on parameter passing. Ultimately, they have to get passed around. So we can make, okay, we've got this output method. We want to process that. Maybe it's log file zoom. And output different objects. And then when we create some sort of output collection out of that, we're going to have to pass down the output dir. We're not going to have to pass down the objects. Let's see, that would have been processed. The seed information has been processed elsewhere. Hmm. Yeah, this feels like a sleep on it problem. Meanwhile, I don't think I've broken anything, so we just kind of copied some stuff out here. All right, new file, some notes about what our problems are. In the meantime, I do have some caching information as new things appeared, and I'm going to regenerate those. So the short length only arc procedure actually would be better for generating like arc data, start end times, and things. So if I just needed to regenerate the arc list, if I just needed to, I could kind of like fake up the placement logs. The process logs. There's just the fact that it's a different procedure. Or as far as calculating end times, it has to stay perfectly synchronized. Hey, Hostile Viking. Yep. I'm. Yeah. Well, I guess the design of Ruby is forcing me to a object-oriented solution, or towards an object-oriented solution. I mean, there are families of data that, or groupings of data that objects would be one way to organize them. I guess the simplest way to convert this might be just do a function module with a bunch of parameters that will let you extract the code into this separate module. And from there, maybe it will be clearer once you've actually got that big long list of parameters. It might give you a better handle on the problem. And, sort of internally to this space, well, the problem I was running into with just call a function is that I've kind of got a couple little extra, I guess you could call them side effects. And I guess I could just pass in these things to be side affected. Or set up an object that manages the lifetime of those objects. But maybe this is a way to baby step it. Just have a big long list. And then we can sort of refactor each parameter on its own. Well, some of the restructurings might not be easy to do incrementally. But anyway, I was thinking that this is something I should probably sleep on. Because I don't know, I guess I just haven't been sleeping well. I've been still kind of fuzzy. And this is a nasty little problem. So I think I'm going to have to call it here, get some lunch. I'm going to have to see if the grocery store is open today. I don't think I really need anything. It's usually when I end up doing it. Oh, and I have to make a note for myself. My subscribers list is not showing up, and I keep forgetting about that. But anyway, thanks. For the follows, for the hosts, for the subscriptions. Do I have anything to recommend? Not a whole lot of other small coders going on. I do see some game dev. Oh. Also, currently AFK. What else? Alright, so I don't know this game. It's one I've seen a bit. So Book Club, or I've seen several people doing it. Book Club for Gamers is doing Life is Strange. I've seen it come up a lot, so it's probably a decent game. I'm guessing, I think it's more of like a story-driven point-and-click style game, but I don't really know. But anyway, for someplace cool to hang out, that's a cool channel and someplace cool to hang out. Thanks for hanging out with me. Goodbye, and until next time.